Picture this, the cold wind howling across a lonely island, the waves crashing against jagged rocks, and behind rusted iron bars, men who were never meant to leave. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison, it was a fortress of despair, a place where hope came to die. Yet somehow, against every odd, some prisoners dared to dream the impossible: escape. Alcatraz prison, sitting on a rocky island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, was once called the Rock. From 1934 to 1963, it housed some of the most dangerous criminals in America: murderers, gangsters, and escape artists who had failed everywhere else. Surrounded by icy, fast-moving waters and guarded by unrelenting officers, Alcatraz was designed to be unbreakable. Every wall, every cell, every rule was built with one goal: to make escape impossible. Yet through the years, whispers of attempts spread like ghost stories through the prison halls. Each one told of desperate men who refused to accept their fate. They chipped at concrete, planned in shadows, and gambled their lives against the tide. This wasn't just a prison, it was a stage where fear, cunning, and hope collided under flickering lights. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy dark history stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your feedback in the comments. The story of Alcatraz is one of silence, salt, and steel. Long before its concrete walls rose from the jagged rock, the island already carried whispers of fear. Native tribes once refused to set foot there, calling it a cursed place, a realm of restless spirits trapped between sea and sky. When the US government claimed it in the mid-1800s, the legend shifted from ghosts to men. First came the soldiers, disciplinary cases from distant forts, sent to this windswept outpost for punishment. Later came the criminals, the ears. Land was small, just over 20 acres of rock, but it would soon become one of the most infamous addresses on Earth. In 1934, as the Great Depression gripped America, the federal government sought a solution for its most unmanageable prisoners, men who had escaped other prisons, attacked guards, or corrupted entire institutions from within. Alcatraz was reborn as a fortress. Its walls were poured thick with reinforced concrete, its fences layered with barbed wire and armed towers. Even the geography seemed to conspire against escape. The water surrounding it was freezing, the currents unpredictable, the sharks, though small, enough to terrify. From the mainland, the city of San Francisco glittered like a cruel joke, visible but untouchable. It was said that on clear nights, inmates could hear the laughter of people on shore, a reminder of what freedom sounded like. Inside, life moved in mechanical rhythm. Each cell measured 5 feet wide, 9 feet long, barely room to turn around. A bed, a sink, a toilet, a single shelf. The walls dripped with condensation in winter, and in summer the heat clung to the concrete like sweat. Silence was enforced, order absolute. The rules were printed and memorized. No talking in the corridors, no gestures through bars, no staring at guards. Meals were short, showers were cold, and every man followed the same narrow schedule from dawn to lights out. It wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake, it was control. Alcatraz wasn't built to rehabilitate, it was built to contain. Its warden, James A. Johnston, called it a model of discipline, but the prisoners had other names for it. They called it Alcatraz. They said the island had a heartbeat that never let you sleep, that the fog pressed against the walls like a living thing, whispering that no one ever left alive. The guards who patrolled the tiers believed the island was escape-proof. They trusted the triple-locked doors, the armed checkpoints, and the sea itself. Yet history teaches us that no cage, no matter how perfect, can hold the idea of freedom forever. It started small, quiet men watching patterns, measuring distances with their eyes, studying the guards' steps. They carved pieces of metal from discarded workshop scraps, bent spoons into keys, and used stolen pencils to sketch crude blueprints in secret. Even the sound of the ocean became part of their plan, masking the faint scrape of chipping concrete. The warden insisted that escape from Alcatraz was suicide. He was partly right. For most who tried, the ocean claimed them before the current could even shift. Still, hope, once sparked, doesn't drown easily. Inside those narrow cells, men began to imagine the impossible. Some of the earliest escape attempts were clumsy, driven more by desperation than planning. In 1936, a man named Joseph Bowers tried to climb the perimeter fence during work duty in the industry's yard. Guards shouted warnings, but Bowers kept climbing, blood streaming from his hands where the wire tore his skin. He never made it to the top. The bullets struck before he reached the final coil and his body tumbled to the rocks below. Others tried to swim. In 1937, Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe filed through window bars in the machine shop and slipped into the fog. Their makeshift raft was found days later, torn apart by waves. Their bodies were never recovered. Officially, they were listed as presumed drowned, but in the mess hall, whispers said otherwise, that maybe they had reached the shore, hidden in the fog, vanished into freedom. The guards scoffed. The warden doubled security. The myth, however, had already begun to grow. Each failed attempt added a new verse to the legend of the Rock. Years passed. The prison functioned with grim efficiency, yet beneath its surface, the tension simmered. Guards feared riots, prisoners feared madness. Solitary confinement in D Block was the worst punishment of all. A small cell, no light, no sound, just endless time. Some men cracked after days in the dark, screaming until their throats bled. Others went silent forever, staring into nothing. Still, for a select few, the darkness became a workshop for dreams. They studied maps in the library, learned the rhythm of the tides, and collected whatever scraps they could from the workshops. Bits of wire, old raincoats, stolen glue. They spoke little, trusted no one, but the idea of escape had become religion. It wasn't about survival anymore, it was about defiance, about proving that even Alcatraz could bleed. By the late 1950s, new inmates arrived with fresh ambition. The prison was aging, the concrete cracked, the pipes rusted, and the guards grew complacent. Among the newcomers were men whose names would soon echo through history: Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. Morris was a thinker, quiet and sharp. He had escaped from other prisons before, and his file described him as possessing superior intelligence. The Anglin brothers were craftsmen, experienced bank robbers from Florida with a talent for working with their hands. Together they saw what others didn't: tiny weaknesses in the supposedly perfect system. Morris studied the layout of the cell block, memorizing every sound. He noticed that behind each cell was a small, unused utility corridor. If they could reach it, they could climb to the roof. The plan formed slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle only the desperate could solve. They began by digging, carefully, silently, using spoons stolen from the cafeteria, sharpened into crude chisels. The concrete around the air vents was old, weakened by years of salt and moisture. Every night, as the guards made their rounds, Morris and the Anglins worked, covering the noise with the sound of their homemade accordion, pretending to play music. To hide the holes, they crafted false vent covers for ROM cardboard and paint stolen from the maintenance shop. It was genius born from monotony. Over months, they tunneled through the concrete until each hole was large enough for a man to squeeze through. In the darkness behind the walls, they built a hidden workshop. Using old raincoats, they stitched together a life raft and life vests, sealing the seams with glue made from stolen materials. They even constructed dummy heads from soap, toilet paper, and real human hair taken from the barber shop, props that would lie in their beds during the escape. Night after night, the plan grew more daring. They timed the guards' rounds, memorized the flicker of flashlights, and marked which officers lingered too long at the end of the tiers. It was a game of patience and paranoia. One mistake meant death, yet none of them wavered. The prison around them groaned with age, the lights dimmed at curfew, and the endless wind outside whispered promises of open sky. Imagine being there, lying in that cell, listening to the guards' footsteps fade. The ocean pounding against the walls, the cold smell of salt and rust filling your lungs. Every heartbeat counted, every second mattered. The impossible was only one breath away. By June 1962, the final details were in place. The raft, folded tightly, waited in the service corridor. The dummy heads sat ready on the pillows, painted with the quiet expressions of sleep. For months, no one had suspected a thing. But here's the chilling part. No one ever would, not until it was too late. June 11th, 1962. The night that would forever etch itself into the dark mythology of Alcatraz began like any other. The guards made their rounds, the lights dimmed to a soft glow, and the wind howled outside the cell block like an ancient voice. For Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, it was the moment every sleepless night had led to. Each of them lay still in bed, waiting for the prison to fall into its fragile rhythm of routine. The guards, weary from years of uneventful nights, passed by without suspicion. When the final set of footsteps faded into silence, Morris made his move. With calm precision, he lifted the cardboard vent cover and crawled into the narrow opening behind his cell. The air was thick with dust and the smell of rusted pipes. Every sound, every shift of stone felt deafening in that claustrophobic crawl space. Behind him, the Anglins followed, their hearts pounding in unison. They knew one false move would send them crashing into the concrete below or alert a guard whose flashlight beam could end everything. Yet they pushed forward, inch by inch, through the darkness that separated them from hope. Inside the service corridor, the air was cold, and every movement had to be calculated. Morris had mapped the route in his mind countless times, counting steps, timing breaths. The space was barely wide enough to crawl through, and the clanking of loose pipes echoed like distant footsteps. When they finally reached the utility area near the roof, they paused to listen. No alarms, no shouts, just the slow pulse of the sea beneath the island. Above them, a ventilation shaft blocked the way to the open sky. Using tools fashioned from saw blades and a stolen motor from a vacuum cleaner, they drilled through the rivets one by one. The sound was faint but constant, blending with the mechanical hum of the prison. The process took hours, but by midnight they had loosened the last bolt. The final barrier fell away, revealing the cold night air. The roof awaited them, an expanse of shadows under a silver moon. The city of San Francisco shimmered faintly in the distance, taunting them with its glow. Freedom was only a mile and a half away. yet it might as well have been another world. Climbing onto the roof of Alcatraz was more than a physical act. It was defiance. Few men had ever stood there and lived to tell about it. The wind tore at their clothes, the fog stung their eyes, and the sound of the waves below reminded them of the risk. They crawled across the tarred surface, staying low to avoid the watchtower beams that swept methodically across the yard. One flash of light, one metallic sound, and everything would end. But the island seemed asleep. Down below, guards sipped coffee, unaware that their most notorious prisoners were scaling the last wall between them and history. Reaching the edge of the roof, they slid down a drainpipe to the ground near the shoreline, their bodies bruised and slick with cold sweat. The yard was empty. The air smelled of salt and iron. Time was no longer measured in minutes, but in heartbeats. On the ground, they retrieved the makeshift raft and life vests they had hidden days earlier. The raft, crafted from 50 stolen raincoats and painstakingly glued with homemade adhesive, was crude but buoyant. They inflated it using a small concertina-like device made from the prison's stolen instruments, a handmade miracle in the world's most secure prison. For the first time, the men could see the dark water up close, churning and freezing. The currents around Alcatraz were legendary, capable of dragging a grown man miles off course in minutes. Yet to them, it looked like the only way out. They pushed the raft into the waves and climbed aboard, vanishing into the night. The moonlight caught the edges of the tide for a moment, and then they were gone, swallowed by fog and darkness. No alarms sounded, no sirens wailed. Behind them, the dummy heads lay in the beds, their painted faces peaceful and still. Alcatraz slept through its own humiliation. The next morning, chaos erupted. At first, the guards thought the men were still asleep. The dummy heads were good, too good. Only when one guard reached out and the head rolled onto the floor did the truth set in. A manhunt began instantly. Sirens blared, searchlights swept across the bay, boats scoured the water, while helicopters circled overhead. The fog made visibility near zero, and the tide was strong. By dawn, the news had spread across the country. 3 men had escaped Alcatraz. It was supposed to be impossible. Reporters swarmed the mainland, families crowded the shoreline, and headlines declared, "The Rock breached." The FBI launched one of its largest manhunts in history, led by Special Agent in Charge Warden Overton. Every inch of the island was searched, every cell inspected, but the escape route was undeniable, meticulously planned and brilliantly executed. In their cells, investigators found the tools, the vent holes, and the secret workshop. On the shoreline, they found only fragments, a torn paddle, a homemade life vest, and one raincoat. But there were no bodies, no raft, no conclusive evidence of death. The official narrative quickly took shape. The authorities claimed the men had drowned. The currents, they said, were too strong, the water too cold. No one could have survived that swim, one Coast Guard officer told reporters. Yet doubts lingered. Days later, a boat reported seeing debris floating near Angel Island. A Norwegian freighter crew spotted what they believed was a body, but it was never recovered. A month after the escape, a piece of plywood believed to be from the raft washed ashore near the Golden Gate Bridge. But none of these fragments proved anything. The FBI continued to search for years, compiling hundreds of tips, interrogating relatives, and even reconstructing the raft in laboratories to test its feasibility. Each experiment suggested the same haunting truth. It was possible. Difficult, yes. Deadly, certainly, but not impossible. Decades later, the mystery refused to die. The case was officially closed in 1979, but rumors persisted. The Anglin family claimed to have received unsigned postcards and photographs of the brothers in South America. One photo, dated 1975, appeared to show 2 men resembling John and Clarence standing beside a farm tractor in Brazil. Experts were divided. Some said it was authentic, others dismissed it as fantasy. In 2013, the FBI received a letter supposedly written by one of the escapees, claiming he was still alive but dying of cancer, asking for medical help in exchange for a confession. Handwriting experts analysed it, but the results were inconclusive. Even today, the letter sits in FBI archives, part of a case that refuses to rest. But beyond the facts and theories lies something deeper. The idea that these men, trapped in a system built to crush them, dared to rewrite its ending. Their story isn't about perfect heroes or villains. It's about human defiance, the refusal to accept fate. Whether they drowned in the bay or walked into the dawn of a new life, their courage was undeniable. Imagine them out there in the fog, paddling against the current, their fingers numb, their breath short, the city lights flickering like stars. Maybe they made it. Maybe they didn't. But in that moment, they were free. Even now, visitors to Alcatraz walk past those same cells, staring at the tiny holes carved in the concrete, the painted dummy heads preserved behind glass. Tour guides lower their voices when they reach the escape exhibit, letting the silence speak. Some say they feel a chill in the air, as if the island remembers. Perhaps it does. Perhaps the waves that crash against the shore still echo the rhythm of paddles striking water, still carry the sound of men who refuse to disappear quietly. Alcatraz never officially lost a prisoner, they say, but the sea might tell another story. The story of Alcatraz didn't end with that night. It transformed. The escape shattered the illusion of absolute security, and the prison never fully recovered. In the years that followed, Alcatraz became more than a fortress. It became a question. Could anyone really have escaped, or had the myth of the impossible finally been broken? For the guards who remained, the atmosphere changed. They walked the tiers with a new kind of tension, glancing over their shoulders, checking locks twice. The sound of the ocean, once background noise, now seemed to mock them. Whispers spread through the cell blocks that the men had survived, that they had reached the mainland disguised as fishermen or blended into the city crowds. The inmates who remained drew hope from the rumor. For the first time, the word escape no longer meant death, it meant possibility. The warden denied it, of course, calling the men presumed drowned. But denial couldn't erase what had happened. The legend of Alcatraz had evolved from fear into fascination. After the escape, the FBI continued its investigation with relentless precision. Agents interviewed family members of the Anglins, tracked bank withdrawals, and even followed up on reported sightings from Mexico to Montana. Each lead led to another dead end. Yet, every few years, something new emerged. A photograph, a letter, a rumor whispered by a retired officer. One guard swore he saw a man who looked like Frank Morris on the streets of Chicago in 1967. Another said a fisherman found a waterproof wallet floating near the Golden Gate, containing IDs with the Anglins' names. The wallet was real, but the connection couldn't be proven. Then there was the mysterious phone call made to the Anglin family home on Christmas in 1962. The line was static-filled, but the voice simply said, "This is John," before hanging up. No one could confirm it, but to the family it was enough to keep hope alive. For them, the escape wasn't a crime. It was a redemption. The Anglin brothers had grown up poor, working in Florida fields, drawn into bank robbery by desperation more than evil. To their mother, they were still boys who promised to come home. Until the day she died, she left 2 empty seats at her kitchen table every holiday, just in case her sons returned. Meanwhile, Alcatraz itself was decaying. The prison's costs were rising, too. Salt air corroding everything metal, the plumbing failing, and the morale collapsing. By 1963, barely a year after the Great Escape, the federal government shut it down. The rock was no longer worth maintaining. For decades it sat abandoned, a ghostly silhouette in the bay. Vines grew through cracks in the walls, seagulls nested in the watchtowers, and the echo of footsteps disappeared into silence. But the legend refused to fade. In the 1970s, when the island reopened as a national park, tourists flocked to see the infamous prison that no one could escape, except perhaps 3 men who might have proved otherwise. Guides told the story with reverence, pausing dramatically at the cells of Morris and the Anglin brothers. The dummies still lay in the bunks, their painted faces eerily calm, as if still waiting for the next count. Visitors leaned close, imagining the sound of scraping spoons and the quiet determination that had once filled this corridor. Some swore they could feel it, the defiance, the audacity, the raw will to be free. But Alcatraz isn't just about those who escaped, it's about those who never did. The vast majority of men who lived there spent their lives in monotony, their spirits broken by isolation. The guards, too, suffered, trapped in routine, surrounded by hostility, and haunted by the sea that isolated them from the world. The island consumed everyone who served it, prisoner and guard alike. There are still stories told by those who worked the night shifts, of voices echoing from empty cells, footsteps in D-block long after it was sealed. Some say the spirits of the men who died there never left, caught in an endless loop of confinement. Whether true or not, the air on Alcatraz still feels heavy with memory. When you walk through its corridors today, the walls seem to breathe with the echoes of the past. The paint peels like shedding skin, and the cells stand like open graves. Each one tells a story of defiance, despair, and dreams that refuse to die. In the decades since the escape, Alcatraz has been studied by historians, scientists, and escape artists alike. In 2014, Dutch researchers from Delft University used computer simulations to analyze the tides on the night of June 11, 1962. Their findings stunned everyone. The data showed that if the men had launched their raft between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, the currents could have carried them safely to the northern shore near Marin Headlands. Any later, and they would have been swept out to sea. The timing matched almost perfectly with what was known from the prison's records. The conclusion was clear: survival was possible. That revelation reignited the debate. Documentaries, books, and movies revisited the case, each offering new theories. Some experts argued the men were too weak, too cold, too unprepared. Others countered that desperation can make men superhuman. When you've already lost everything, one criminologist said, you stop fearing death. And maybe that's what made their escape so powerful, not just the planning, but the will. Today, the cells of Morris and the Anglins are frozen in time. The fake vents, the tools, the dummies, all preserved behind glass, a monument to audacity. Tourists peer in, imagining the night the impossible became real. The chill in the air feels different there, heavier somehow. And when the tour guide pauses and asks, "Do you think they made it?" no one answers right away. Because the truth doesn't matter as much as the possibility. That's what gives the story its power. Alcatraz was built on the promise that no man could escape. Yet, 3 men might have proved otherwise. Whether they drowned in the dark water or lived long enough to see the sunrise, their act cracked the foundation of the myth. It showed that even in the most hopeless places, the human spirit still looks for a way out. Standing on the island today, you can see the mainland shimmering just across the bay. It's so close you could almost swim to it, if not for the cold, the currents, and the fear. Tourists take photos, laugh, and move on. But if you linger, you'll feel it, that quiet tension that never left. The same wind that once howled through the cell block still carries the echo of defiance. Maybe somewhere Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers did make it. Maybe they built new lives under new names, living quietly in the shadow of their legend. Or maybe the sea took them, and their bones rest beneath the tides that once mocked their dreams. Either way, their story became eternal. Alcatraz, once a symbol of hopelessness, became a symbol of the will to survive. And that's the chilling truth about the rock. It was never just a prison. It was a mirror reflecting what people will do when cornered by fate. Some broke, some surrendered, but a rare few, looked beyond the bars and saw something else, the horizon. They believed that freedom, even if it lasted only for a breath, was worth dying for. That belief, more than anything, is what keeps their legend alive. And maybe that's why, even today, when fog drapes over the island and the gulls cry above the ruins, people swear they can hear the faint splash of paddles in the water, 3 men, forever rowing toward the impossible. Alcatraz stands today not just as a monument to punishment, but to persistence. The walls remain, cracked and weathered, echoing with the footsteps of those who once dared to challenge the impossible. Whether Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers survived or not has become almost irrelevant, because their story transcends fact. It's about courage in the face of futility, about refusing to surrender even when every door is locked. As the waves crash against the island's edge, they seem to whisper the same lesson, that hope, once awakened, can never truly be contained. Every visitor who walks through those narrow halls feels it, the unspoken defiance, the haunting possibility that maybe, just maybe, the impossible was achieved. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, like the video, and tell us in the comments what type of stories you'd like to see.